Live everywhere.
Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman, Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, June 28th, 2017. Ready to roll out another show? I guess you'd better get ready if you're not, because it's 9 o'clock. You got no choice. What's in the news today? Well, of course, we'll be discussing, and what a great day, by the way, to have both Greg Dworkin and Joan McCarter joining us. We'll be discussing what happened yesterday with the Senate Medicaid repeal bill, and that's really the only proper way to refer to it at this point. It has stalled for the time being. I don't think that there's anybody in the audience that doesn't grasp the fact that this is just a temporary stop in this, and that no pressure can come off of our senators for trashing this bill forever. They may come back with this very same bill just after the July 4th break. They may tweak it a little bit. They may go back to the drawing board, but pressure can never relent. I mean, I guess if you haven't learned anything see ya. Bye. You're probably wasting your time and you're getting a sense of it. But surely by now you will have learned from listening to Joan McCarter all this time. I mean, even as something as straightforward by comparison to healthcare policy in general for the entire country, by comparison, something as simple as net neutrality never goes away. Certainly this will never go away. So again, no relenting in the pressure. You should absolutely, the whole point of the effort to delay the vote was to drive senators back to their home states for the July 4th recess and to confront them with the reality of what their bill does. You've now been granted that opportunity. You must take advantage of it. It can't be now that you slow down. The whole plan was always to make the big push next week anyway. So absolutely don't fail in doing that. And I didn't think any of you were going to, but that's perhaps perhaps another way of looking at it this morning. Certainly lots of attention being paid to it. Lots of attention being paid to the fact that Donald Trump is a huge believer in fake news, as it turns out. My what shall we say? It has tickled my fancy. Whee, that's something, that's good morning conversation. To find out that Donald Trump has, thanks once again to the brilliant reporting of David Fahrenthold, another award, no doubt, in the works for this story. This one covered, by the way, over at Daily Kos by Jen Hayden, our own Scout Finch, who picked up the story after the Washington Post folks circulated. I saw it pretty quickly on Twitter, and I couldn't contain myself. We'll let Jen give the description here and introduce the thing. Trump has a fake Time magazine cover framed on the walls of his golf clubs, and the Washington Post folks sent out, I guess, the actual Time magazine issue for the date nearest the fake date that they put on the Time magazine cover, I guess is what it is. It was allegedly, shall I just, I'll just dive right in. Here's Jen's description. Ladies and gentlemen, Donald Trump literally has fake news hanging on the walls of his golf clubs. The Washington Post discovered at least 4, I think it's now up to 5, Trump-owned properties featured a framed Time magazine, and we have to put that in scare quotes, bunny ears quotes, Time magazine cover featuring the Donald. The problem, they are completely phony, and they're not just talking about Donald Trump. This cover, dated March 1st, 2009, looks like an impressive memento from Trump's pre-presidential career, this quoting from the Washington Post write-up of it. To club members eating lunch or golfers waiting for a pro shop purchase, it seemed to be a signal that Trump has always been a man who mattered. Even when he was just a reality TV star, Trump was the kind of star who got a cover story in Time. But that wasn't true. That wasn't true. Sorry, where's my sound effects on that? That wasn't true. There we go. It's too bad. But not true. It's a fake. there was no March 1st, 2009 issue of Time magazine, and there was no issue at all in 2009 that had Trump on the cover. The nearest date of an actual Time magazine, I guess that's what they're running here. I can't read the date on the March 2nd, March 3rd, and of course it has Kate Winslet on the cover, and they pointed out all the differences between the actual Time magazine layout and how they laid this thing out. My theory on this, and it's important that you have my theory, because I tweeted around this morning as he was bragging on his engagement in the health care bill, which isn't a health care bill. That'll measure his level of engagement right there. We'll get to that in just a minute. But he's not engaged in anything. He doesn't understand anything that's in this bill. He doesn't understand anything that's happening around the world, or even in his own world. My theory is that he was fooled by this Time magazine cover. I have no proof for this, but I feel certain that the story will come out. I believe somebody mocked this thing up as a novelty gift for Trump. There are two competing theories. The competing theory is he is such an egomaniac. He said, I want you to go out and I want you to make a Time magazine cover with me on the cover talking about how awesome The Apprentice is. And I want, and I want you to hang that in all my golf properties. My theory, though, is that somebody presented it to him as a novelty gift. I don't know, maybe Joey No Socks did it. And he loved it. He was overwhelmed by it, and he ordered his people to go out and I want you to get me 100 copies, get as many as you can, and I want them framed, I want them hanging in all of our properties. And they were, I think at that point then became too embarrassed to fess up that they had mocked this thing up as a fake. He would be outraged with them. So I think they thought, what's the harm? Most people probably won't be able to tell. And they're hanging in Trump properties. And as David Fairnhold wrote in his piece, the whole place is an egomaniac stream. It's all a tribute to Trump and his name and his face. There's art hanging all over the walls with his face on it. It was famously, that's what Fairnhold broke through writing about. And so it probably will go unnoticed as a fake. And I guess up until now it did. The guy's president of the United States. We didn't notice this fake Time magazine thing because it's routine for him. He always does this stuff. So that's my theory. I'm plucking it out of thin air, but that seems to me the most plausible explanation for getting it onto the walls of some of his properties, but not all of them. And he's not handing them out or anything. But I think he really thought that was true and that he deserved to be on the cover of Time magazine. I did have somebody object. He knows every magazine that interviews him, but I think that he thought that they didn't interview him. They were simply writing about him without interviewing him because he was so awesome. Of course he was on the cover of Time magazine. He has a hit TV show. So I don't know. We'll see whether that bears itself out. It's certainly not important in the grand scheme of things. That's why we've got Greg Dworkin here. He knows what's important in the grand scheme of things. And so we brought him in. I haven't let him say anything, but we brought him here.
Hi,
I
do. I know these things.
You know that there are important things.
I do.
I am not certain that I do.
Here's a great tweet from Donald J. Trump, the real Donald Trump, as he's known on Twitter. And I think that this will help put things in perspective for the whole ball of wax here. He says, some of the fake news media likes to say, I am not totally engaged in healthcare. Wrong. I know the subject well and want victory for U.S.
Yes.
And Michael Cohen, SpeechBoy71 on Twitter, tweets back to him, great. What does guaranteed issue mean?
Yeah, I mean, if you could sit him down and question him about things.
How does Medicaid work?
Right. I mean,
just ask him some of those things, and the whole thing is exposed. And in fact, the whole thing was exposed. Now you see stories in the Washington Post, which everybody in Washington reads. Who's afraid of Trump? Not enough Republicans, at least for now. Or the Senate health care bill is proof Trumpism isn't populism. Emperor has no clothes kind of stuff. But let me try to put in perspective what actually happened here. And hopefully Joan will be on to help clear up some of the process issues. But I got some interesting process observations here to go along with what actually happened.
What did happen?
Well, the Senate bill was pulled.
Yes.
And I'm going to start with Axios. I have a long list I sent you. It was so long I actually reordered it. So about 2/3 down, it says, hey, forget about all that other stuff. Let me give you a number 1, 2, 3 list here. We like lists on the show, right? So 1, 2, 3 in terms of which ones we're going to cover, so you can follow along. I'm going to start with Axios, which has a piece this morning by Mike Allen, the Senate's healthcare time bomb. And one of the things I like about this piece is that it's short. Another thing I like about this piece is it's got a graphic of Mitch McConnell's head sinking into his collar just like a turtle. It's really cool.
That's good. That wins the morning.
That wins the morning. Senate healthcare time bomb. NPR and PBS NewsHour are out this morning with a Marist poll, Lee Miringoff, good pollster, showing 17% approval of the Senate's healthcare plan. That's the Senate, not just it's the House and it's like the House. This is the Senate one. And 21% approval of the GOP's handling of healthcare. By the way, those numbers are dismal in case anybody doesn't know that.
Wow,
that may partly reflect how the question was asked, but it's a disgrace when your party controls the whole federal apparatus, this article says, and it shows the foreboding feat Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell faces in trying to revive, repeal, and replace after his stunning gamble to punt the vote until after the July 4th break. The announcement was followed by a swarm of defections. Opposition was suddenly cost-free. The lull gives more time for negotiation, but more likely, more time for opposition to metastasize and spook senators when they're home for the holiday. By the way, one of the defectors was Senator Moran from Jerry Moran from Kansas.
Yes.
Right? Do you remember the old sign?
Yes.
Get a brain, Morans.
Right.
Morans. So the tweet was, I think it was from Southpaw. Moran gets a brain.
Well, good.
Suddenly realizes it's not a good idea to vote for this.
Yeah.
Very funny.
This was the whole idea, of course, of pushing to delay the vote, was that they would have this opportunity. We'd have one more opportunity to really give it to our senators while they're home, if they come home.
Well, but here's the thing. As Republicans argue, senators will be spending time with conservative backers who will remind them of their pledge, but it's also more time for the real-world effects to sink in and for opposition to snowball as senators decide they can't stomach a career-defining vote when freighted with so many unknowns. As one person closely tracking the debate emailed, it feels like McConnell is moving inevitably toward his own Obamacare is the law of the land moment. And yeah, Sarah Cliff and Joan and you and everybody will remind us it ain't over till it's over. And just because this bill was pulled doesn't mean another bill might not come back. But the question is, can this one really be tweaked? And my answer is probably no. And the reason is that the moderate senators, including Collins, has been pretty tough on this, surprisingly, cannot really stomach what they're doing to Medicaid. Because why? Because the governors in the states can't tolerate it. And one of the things that pushes Adine Heller in Nevada to oppose the bill in ways that nobody expected him to is because Governor Sandoval says it's awful.
Yeah.
And Kasich in Ohio will be pushing Portman. That won't do any good. But there's other states where it will matter. And in fact, don't just contact your senators, folks. Contact your governors.
That's a good point.
Tell them that this is really important to do this. There's a couple of pieces in the New York Times. Alex Burns has one. I have it in the Pundit Roundup. And there's another one about how important it is that the governors under the table, behind doors, quietly, were opposing this. And in fact, not so behind closed doors because they got together in a bipartisan manner the other day. They had Kasich and Hickenlooper at the same place, same time, talking about how this was a terrible bill. So you've got doctors, organizations, healthcare organizations, American Hospital Association, et cetera, saying this is a terrible bill. You have the governor saying that this is a terrible bill in a bipartisan manner. And this may just be the thing that brings ordinary political gravity back to Washington.
Well, I would take it.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about process and how McConnell screwed up. One of the other pieces I really like is a piece by the New York Times. McConnell's reputation as a master tactician takes a hit.
Yes.
You can't open up a paper without reading the bill looks dead, but don't ever underestimate McConnell.
Right.
McConnell screwed up here in a big way. Let's just call it what it is. Okay? And one of the ways that he did this, and it's really well laid out, I think, by James Hohmann in the Daily 202 over at the Washington Post. Secrecy backfires on Mitch McConnell as Senate healthcare bill teeters. Mm-hmm. What happened here is that he decided that tactically master tactician, terrible strategist, but good tactician, decided that it would be a good idea to do all of this secretly. That way, people wouldn't really know what's going on, and so they couldn't criticize it. And he's right. And that happened. And it was off the front pages, and the media, especially cable, didn't have any video-style information to put out there, so nobody was talking about it while everybody was talking about Russia. Russia was not a distraction. It's a big story in and of itself, but this is going to take front page because it just will. And so then he brings up the bill. But here's part of the problem. Because he did it in secret, and because even his own caucus didn't know what was in the bill, look at the reaction that people had from his own caucus. This was a caucus revolt. How do we know? We had people who are really, really, really solid, I'm going to vote for it no matter what, Republicans who were flummoxed in terms of what to say in public because of the process. You have people like Joni Ernst and Thad Cochran. I mean, really reliable people who were going to vote on the motion to proceed. And the motion to proceed, of course, is the thing that makes or breaks the bill. That's what was supposed to be voted on yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to block it, if you're going to vote no, you're going to vote no there. Because you're not going to vote yes and then get stuck with what are you going to do in public on the vote to whether you did or didn't vote for this bill. You don't want to vote for the bill, you're going to vote not to proceed. I didn't vote against the bill. Don't pin me with commercials saying that I voted against Obamacare or for Obamacare. It never came to a vote.
Right.
It was all procedure. You can't make a commercial out of procedure. Mm-hmm. All right. So you have the people who were going to vote for it. And what are they saying? They're saying things like, I still have to study the bill. They're saying things like, I don't have enough information. That's what Ron Johnson's line was. The guy who everybody knew was going to vote for it but didn't want to do it in public. I don't have enough information. And what does that mean? It means that the Congressional Budget Office comes out with this report that says 22 million people aren't going to have insurance, and that doesn't look good. And where are the Republicans on local and national television defending the bill? Nowhere to be seen. They're saying, I'm still studying it, because they don't know what's in it. They can't go back and say, I'm going to defend it because X, Y, and Z, because they have no clue as to what the bill actually is.
Right.
So you take away all of that. The cable TV loves to put Republicans on. They didn't have any Republicans to put on. And so it's all anti-bill coverage. 24/7. And guess what? The pressure really starts to build up when that happens. So, even cable, who would rather have Republicans on all the time giving you BS and trying to snow you and gaslight you, they couldn't because there was nothing to do there. And when you have a reliable vote, like Ron Johnson saying, I can't vote for this.
That's pretty reliable.
You screwed up.
Yeah. But in a masterful way.
In a masterful way. And Jerry Moran and some of these other folks really didn't want to vote for this bill. They would have if it ever came up because they're reliable Republicans, but they didn't want to. Why? Not in the case of Jerry Moran. He's from Kansas. I mean, his governor is an idiot. But go back to Nevada and go back to some of these other places. And the governors are telling you this is a terrible deal for the state. Don't do it. And that pressure, which is not visible, mattered at least as much as anything else. Mm-hmm. So Mitch McConnell said a very, very interesting thing the other day. He warned his conference in a heavy-handed move to try to get them to do what he wanted and bend to his will. He said, if you don't do this, we're going to have to negotiate with Democrats.
Dun dun.
And it was like that scene in MASH, when Hot Lips Houlihan wants to resign her commission and nobody cares.
Okay.
I'm going to resign my commission. Go ahead. Who cares? I mean, you're telling me that like it's a big deal. I don't care. So you're going to actually negotiate with Democrats? I don't care. Yeah,
okay.
Their Affordable Care Act could use some fixing. You could add something where maybe the U.S. could negotiate drug prices and bring drug prices down, which is part of the driver for why premiums go up. But the fact of the matter is, the reason that premiums went up under Obamacare is that it's much better insurance than people had before.
Yes.
It actually covers things. It's not junk.
And so
when you need it, you need it. Now you're going to take that away from people. That's not going to work so well. And Medicaid, for all of its problems, actually is pretty popular with the public who has coverage. It's a upper middle class thing to thumb your nose at Medicaid and think it's somehow inferior insurance. When you walk in the doctor's office, nobody knows what you have. Front desk does. Nobody in the waiting room does. And you get treated exactly the same.
Right.
So if you don't have insurance, you're more than happy to get Medicaid. And Medicaid is something where people go on and off depending upon their circumstances, 6 months or a year and a half, and then you get a job or a different job, and now you don't have to be on it anymore. It's not the stigma that the Republicans would like to make it to be. And so it's not as unpopular as they would like to make it to be. And taking that away from people it is not what people want. How do we know this? Let's talk a little bit about the polling that came out. But before we do that, I want to go through this wonderful, wonderful tweet storm by Stephen Dennis, who's one of the Republican reporters who covers the Congress closely and knows these people.
Wait, did you just say? I think you just said he was a Republican reporter. He's not.
No, congressional reporter.
Yes.
Sorry. But this is on the Republicans. Listen to him.
Gotcha.
Toughest BCRA votes in order: Collins, Paul, Heller, Markowski, Lee, Johnson, Capito, Cassidy, Portman, Moran, Cruz, McCain, Corcoran, Flake.
Okay. That is to say that it would be toughest for them to vote for it?
Yeah.
Is that what it is? Okay. Okay.
Now listen. Several of these senators, because the assumption is, they're all the same, they're all going to fold this, that, and everything.
Yes.
That's not how it's working.
Oh.
Here's what he writes. Several of these senators owe Trump nothing.
True.
Can't really be threatened. Do have things they care about, like Yucca, ANWR, etc. In other words, they could be bribed.
Yes.
And then it says, I should have included Cotton, but he's been very quiet.
True. And
Don't forget, Arkansas has a big Medicaid expansion that they did, and they did it their way according to exemptions.
Mm-hmm.
The senator who has the most political independence in the bunch, elected in large part by Democrats, is Markowski. And that observation explains her comments yesterday when she was asked about it. Why can't you negotiate with Democrats? She says, I want to. I'd be happy to.
Oh.
That's the proper way.
Yeah.
She said that in public, and everybody gasped. How can Republicans say that? Because Democrats elected her, that's how. You can assume that there's a reason, Stephen Dennis writes, why Collins, Markowski, and Heller, flanking Trump and Rand, got summoned for a private audience.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When Trump did his big bus him over to the White House yesterday, Collins, Markowski, and Heller clearly in the picture right next to him. Sass's statement, dissatisfied, is about as anodyne as they come, although notably he's predicted they won't act before the midterms.
Oh.
I previously ranked Cassidy, he said, as harder to get, but he's been talking far more positively about leadership approach in the last couple of weeks. Cassidy's been a huge disappointment to me. He's a doc, he should know better, and he's got his own Collins-Cassidy bill. Maybe he's being nice because he wants them to be nice to him, but, that's part of the dynamic too. Hardest to read, Ron Johnson, who talks of working with Democrats and reviving pre-existing conditions, which Zero D's would back.
Oh. Yes.
That just tells me Ron Johnson isn't very bright.
Okay.
Right? Moran sleeper, because he came out as a no after the bill was already headed for dumpster fire territory. Moran has avoided taking sides in the war between Brownback and moderate R's in Kansas, but he's a former NRSC chairman and he can read a poll.
Okay.
Like the one that just came out that said 17% approval. Moran has told me he's worried about rural hospitals closing in the state. That's what I mean about state issues and governors having input about this.
Yes.
McCain, meanwhile, is drafting amendments to give Arizona a plus up in its Medicaid match. But he doesn't really sound like a no because McCain's a phony. We know that. Portman is lower on the list despite his statements because he's been talking about wind down of Medicaid expansion numbers and gettable with $45 billion for opioids. Maybe we'll have time to talk about that too. Capito's statement reads much tougher than Portman, but announcing a no vote on a bill that's already been postponed. Well, she's also a member of leadership from Trump's best state, but West Virginia has few wealthy people who would get a tax cut and mucho Medicaid.
Yes.
Now, Rand Paul, is a real libertarian who has repeatedly shown willingness to thwart party et al. If you get all the conservatives in Paul, you still need one of Collins, Markowski, and Heller's making fairly clear he's a no, unless Sandoval's a yes, and Sandoval hates this bill. That's what I mean about the governors having input. Relating again to this thread, not one senator on the list put the tax cuts as goal number one, but there they remain north of $500 billion. Nor are senators saying, let's scrap the tax cuts. If you want to work with Democrats, you scrap the tax cuts. And that may be what McConnell's talking about and why he's telling his conference, his caucus, his group, do this or we got to deal with Schumer.
Okay.
Schumer's going to say, fine, get rid of the tax cuts and get rid of the Medicaid cuts, and we have something to talk about. And that's absolutely right, and that's what they don't want to do. And then Dennis adds one more thing about Markowski. In my conversations with her, this issue is very personal. Alaska arguably is hit hardest by BRCA, and he just thinks she's not going to necessarily crack. She's told me she doesn't want a polar payoff. She wants a bill that works for the country. Tax cuts are not her priority. Premiums are. And she's not up until 2022. And that's when the bite from BRCA cuts would be accelerating. But Alaska also has the highest premiums in the nation. Insurers don't want to compete there for a tiny percentage of sparsely populated state, 2 times the size of Texas. Flake and Corker are the second and third most endangered Republicans, but former Never-Trumper Flake faces a primary from Trump-friendly. Normally loquacious Flake has clammed up in hallways. Corker's expressed vague concerns. Cruz wants to get the yes. Getting a deal would turn around his obstructionist brand. So I don't know if he wants it or he doesn't want it. Eller may be best example of shifting winds. Voted to nuke Medicaid expansion 18 months ago, and now he's voting no. Lee raised eyebrows when he wrote BRCA equals less spending on the poor to pay for corporate bailouts and tax cuts. Lee wants a full opt-out of the ACA regs for states. And that would be a disaster for Democrats and disaster for the public.
Right.
That means you can, charge whatever you want. And there's parts of the bill that people looked at from a procedural point of view and said, if you give states complete freedom to do whatever they want with the Medicaid stuff, they could use Medicaid money to pay for roads.
Sure.
For tax breaks and other things that have nothing to do, just like with the tobacco money. So if you want to see an ugly poll result, Steve Dennis says, ask voters if insurers should be able to charge people more because they've been sick. 80% say no.
Yeah.
That's what it means to get rid of those regulations for states.
Yes.
Rand also doesn't trust the waivers because he worries states wouldn't use them. Meanwhile, ACA popularity has jumped since Trump won. So this is all the background and why it's so difficult to get this done. How do you work with these people? Graham says it's better than Obamacare, which are the magic words to get to yes, says he's dissatisfied, but he's way down on the list. But it's a real bloodbath. People like Cory Gardner from Colorado, I think are going to take a big hit on this, although he was a reliable yes as well. But this is going through the senator by senator difficulties that they're going to have, and now they go back to their constituents, and then they're going to hear it from those constituents. I just don't think it's that easy for McConnell. And yeah, people can say he's a master tactician who has a lot of money to spend in terms of trying to win some of these people over. I don't think some of them are winnable based on this crap bill.
Yeah, well, you ordinarily, as pliant as some of these Republican senators can be, normally they have something that they can point to in there as a positive in the bill. And there isn't anything here except things that make them look like robber barons.
Yeah, exactly. And at the same time, the process of keeping it secret stole the ability to really work out those talking points.
That's true, too.
So kind of an interesting thing. NPR story. Just 17% of Americans approve of Republican Senate healthcare bill in the poll that came out this morning. With mounting defections within the GOP caucus over the bill, leaders decided to delay a vote. With numbers like these, it's not surprising the Republican leadership in Congress is having a difficult time building consensus, said Lee Miringoff, the director of the Marist College Institute for Public Opinion. Democratic opposition to the bill is high. GOP support for the Senate GOP plan is very soft. 21% of Republicans oppose the bill and just 35% support it. Also, 68% of independents also oppose that legislation. And by the way, just as an aside, independents are willing to give Trump the benefit of the doubt, but they've really soured on him. Trump's net approval among independents has fallen 17 points since February. So lather on all you want to about the base and how they'll never leave him. I don't even think that's true. Some of them won't. The rally-goers won't. But losing independence means you lose, period.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I keep hearing somebody sending us Morse code messages over the...
Yeah, I hear that too. I'm not sure where that's from.
Interesting. I wonder if there's some radio transmission of some sort happening near one of us anyway.
I shouldn't have had too many fillings.
Well, yeah, right. It's a message from, all right, from
space.
Yeah.
So Will Jordan, who is the reporter who talks about the YouGov poll.
Yes.
Has some observations about this Marist poll that I think are worth sharing. As I said, 35% of Republicans favor the Senate bill. That's not very good.
No.
The new Marist poll also has Dems rising to 48%, which is a D plus 10 on the generic ballot. It speaks very well for what happens in 2018. Americans now divided or lean slightly towards saying the economy is weakened under Trump. Which is interesting. 39% say it's strengthened and 42% says it's weakened. And 18% are unsure.
Okay.
Also, roughly a fifth, 21% of those who approve of Trump say he's done something at least unethical, if not illegal, in his financial dealings. Wow. That is a soft spot that might, get looked at even further, especially with Kushner lawyering up and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
So that's all back there. A completely separate poll, which is Public Opinion Strategies, also known as POS.
Yes.
Net state views of Affordable Care Act versus the American Health Care Act, that is to say Obamacare versus the House version.
Okay.
In Alaska, Affordable Care Act, Obamacare plus 1, and the House bill minus 33.
Okay.
In Arkansas, minus 6 for Obamacare, minus 14 for the House bill. Colorado, plus 11 versus minus 41. You see where this is going here?
That's bad.
Nevada, plus 8 for Obamacare, minus 34 for the House bill, which is, again, Dean Heller territory. Ohio, plus 11, minus 40. And Tennessee, minus 12, minus 20. So in those key 6 states, the Republican version is less popular than Obamacare is, and that's also worth remembering.
In some of them that on net, Obamacare is actually popular.
Yep. Jonathan Cohen, Citizen Cohen. This argument over premiums and effects of the GOP bill is the same basic debate that played out when the Affordable Care Act took effect, he writes. And this is on his tweet storm here. The first wave of rate shock hit as insurance raised prices and canceled old plans to comply with ACA benefits and pricing standards. That is to say, got rid of the junk insurance and improved the insurance coverage. ACA critics focused on the higher premiums, which is to say the rate shock, and tended to ignore the fact that you're actually getting much better insurance.
Yeah. Now,
the ACA defenders pointed to subsidies, which discounted those premiums, and regulations which made coverage more available and comprehensive. Today, supporters of the GOP bill say it would reduce average premiums for the typical plan. That's true, eventually. But the critics of the GOP plan say the plans would cover less, and taking into account subsidies actually cost people more, which is also true. That is to say, as your premiums drop, your deductibles go up.
Yeah.
Right? So that's all part of the discussion. It's always been part of the discussion. It's interesting. Heidi Pritzbiller was on Meet the Press yesterday talking about that. Or actually the show on the 4 o'clock show before Meet the Press, she was on with Nicole Wallace.
Okay.
And Heidi Pritzbiller pointed out, the whole discussion about who really got hardest hit by these premium rises accounts for about 3% of the population. You wouldn't know that listening to the discussions and how everybody blathers about it.
Right.
Now, it matters to those people, and that should be fixed. And Heidi's point was you need a surgical fix here to fix that 3%, which is very different than getting rid of the whole program.
That's true.
Which is true. Which is the whole thing about why repeal is such a dumb thing to do.
Yeah.
So I thought that was quite useful in bringing that up.
It is. It would be a well, duh moment, but for some reason we've been able to get on with this debate for years without.
Mostly because you have Republicans but not Democrats on the cable shows, and that's why it was so interesting that the process didn't allow that to happen, and all of a sudden we're getting a totally different view. Isn't that funny?
That is weird. Talking to different people.
Huh. How do you like that? So that's a summary for this morning, and hopefully that gives people a background in terms of what's going on here. The governors and a lot of people behind the scenes didn't want this bill. Senators were under a lot more pressure than just what McConnell could bring to bear, and his tools weren't enough. And in fact, part of the way that he structured it himself is part of the reason why this failed. So master tactician or not, the strategy was flawed, and he lost.
Oh, well, at least for the time being.
Yes, it's going to go back. Yes, it's going to be redone. But it's going to be a different bill. A different bill isn't this bill. This bill isn't going to happen.
Could be worse, but that's fine.
They'll try to make it worse. That's part of the thing. They'll try to make it just like that's what happened in the House. You made it worse by courting the conservatives. Yes. But what I'm saying is that Markowski and Collins and Heller aren't going to be the easy marks that everybody always assumes they are. Remember Josh Marshall's theory, moderates always fold? They didn't here.
Well, okay. We'll see how long that lasts, and there's no reason why it should.
What was that from different. Good Will Hunting? Do you like apples? Well, how do you like them apples?
Good. Well, it is different with moderates in the Senate to some extent. I mean, they do have.
Yeah, they're not really moderates, and it's the Senate, right? So it's different than the House.
I guess that's true too. And the leverage just isn't there for people who pass themselves off as moderates in the House the same way it is in the Senate. But they're a disappointing bunch to be sure. But it is entirely possible that they may fold in the future, but not on this bill, and that's fine. And a lot of people pointed out that things were following the pattern of the House, that they stalled with their House bill. They were all summoned to the White House. There was some sort of restart. They made the bill worse, and then it passed. And while they could still,
and they got plenty of crap for it too. And I'm not sure if it had to be done all over again, it would go so well.
Right. Well, that's true, and I'm not certain that they're able to get enough of the. I mean, by making the bill worse, they'll harden two no's, and they might soften up some of the other more hesitant names. The people who appear further down the Stephen Dennis list might actually be drawn back into the fold with a worse bill, but the people.
But some of those will be chased away with a worse bill, and actually they'll harden up 3 votes.
And they're the ones at the top
because they'll
of the
harden
list.
up Heller, Markowski, and Collins.
Right. So that's the strategic challenge. Is you take a look at a list of 10 people. Obviously, you want to aim at the larger group, at bringing them back toward yes. But the things that it will take to bring them back toward yes will make it harder to get the people least likely to go along with you no matter what you do. They'll actually become harder no's, and losing with 49 votes in the end is the same as losing with 40. It's a loss.
It's a loss. Although again, I don't think this is ever going to lose by 49 because nobody wants to be that last vote. So it'll be 48, 47.
Very likely.
35, like it would have been if they brought it yesterday.
That would have been fun.
It's funny because, for all of the upsetness we get about how Congress doesn't function, the Senate is better than the House. And the senators really seem to be taking this seriously, and it isn't just a question of what sweetener can you get so that I'll vote yes.
Well, I'm glad to see them break for the week. Obviously, people got good instruction, I think, right at the top of the show. And again, good reminder from you, focus on governors. You don't have to wait for governors to come home. You can start.
Right. Here's another thing. Thank you for bringing that up. Cause, it's another chance for me to interrupt you. And I like interrupting you.
I like nothing better.
So remember, you go back, what is it, for 10 days for this break. And you might think to yourself, yeah, but my senators aren't going to be holding town meetings. How am I supposed to get in touch with them? Well, 2 things. First of all, there are going to be July 4th parades.
True.
People will be there.
Right.
Your elected officials will be there too. They can't avoid a July 4th parade.
And if they
always want to be in front
of it. Yeah.
Right? You'll see them there. So that's a great time to protest. Another time is just to go to their offices. They don't have to be there. Their staff will be there. Right. And make sure that you're seen outside their offices and organize and decide that their local offices are where you're going to wind up having your own town meeting if they won't come to yours.
True enough.
I mean, start the regular way. Try to call them, try to invite them to places, so on and so forth. Find out where they're going to be and make sure you're there. But if all else fails, just show up at their offices.
Sure.
And call the local television station and tell them you'll be there.
That's true too. Make sure that they know that you're there and get good footage of it. If they don't show, Lots of
that's the footage. All these protesters were here, and they refused to come out and talk to me.
And if the television stations won't show, I wouldn't even necessarily despair at that. These days, lots of television stations will happily air your cell phone video if the story happens and they don't make it there.
Right.
But please, by all
and if it doesn't go up on the air, it'll be on their website.
Yes. Oh, that's
and you'll find that your local
there.
paper will cover it too.
That's true. Please hold your phones in landscape orientation. Thank you.
It would be so much better if you do that.
Yes. Although it's funny, it's now become the thing that eyewitness video that is taken on a cell phone that's put on a news station's website that isn't in that is incorrectly or that isn't incorrectly filmed looks like somehow less legitimate and on the spot. they now seeing things in portrait mode with the weird blurring on both sides to make it fit into the,
right.
There's something to it that looks like it's genuinely taken in the moment that more I wouldn't say professionally, but using your actual
the
proper
realism
orientation.
School of film.
Yeah, I guess that's essentially it, right? Like the shaky cameras in Saving Private Ryan. I can't see what's going on, but that's what it was really like.
But that's what it was really like, yeah. All right, so before I go, because that's basically my summary on healthcare, we'll see what Joan, if she's on today. Say hi, Joan.
Hi, Joan.
Has to say about all of this.
All right.
But I have this completely, now for something completely different. And this is from the American Conservative, and it's interesting in terms of everything else that's going on. The article is entitled, Tillerson and Mattis Cleaning Up Kushners' Middle East Mess.
Oh, yeah.
Are the adults in the room being thwarted?
Are there adults in the room?
There are. Well, they're talking about Tillerson and Mattis.
Tillerson. Oh.
And they're talking about, the gutter problem and all of this. And they're talking about how, basically there's nothing that Tillerson can do that isn't going to be completely overruled by Jared Kushner's access to Trump. Okay?
Uh-huh.
And I'm going to read you this one paragraph. A close associate of the Secretary of State says Tillerson was not only blindsided by the Trump statement, taking Saudi Arabia's side rather than Qatar's side, but absolutely enraged that the White House and State Department weren't on the same page. Tillerson's aides, I was told, were convinced that the true author of Trump's statement was UAE Ambassador Yusuf al-Otaiba, a close friend of Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner.
Oh, my goodness.
Rex put two and two together, his close associate says, and concluded this absolutely vacuous kid was running a second foreign policy out of the White House family quarters. Otaiba weighed in with Jared. Jared weighed in with Trump. What a mess. The Trump statement was nearly the last straw for Tillerson, this close associate explains. Rex is just exhausted. He can't get any of his appointments approved. He's running around the world cleaning up after a president whose primary foreign policy advisor is a 31-year-old amateur.
Yes.
And worse yet, at least from Tillerson's point of view, a White House official explained the difference between the two statements by telling the press, ignore the Secretary of State.
I will.
So, you have these people trying to keep us out of war and having the world not explode because Trump is an idiot. You have all these reports that on the healthcare debacle, Trump was deliberately kept on the sideline. If they had to work with anybody in the White House, it was Pence. And they didn't want Trump getting involved. And the only public comment that Mitch McConnell made on this is that it was completely stupid. That was the word he used, stupid, for Trump's super PAC to start running ads against Dean Heller in Nevada. Now, whether or not it's legal to coordinate is another story altogether. But the whole idea that a Trump-supporting super PAC would run ads against a Republican who is going to have a rough re-election is insane in McConnell's mind. Because after all, he's not just trying to destroy the country. That's his second goal. His first goal is Senate majority.
Yes. Well, it is beyond stupid for them to do that, but they'll do it anyway because, of course, Trump has populated the staff of this super PAC with teabaggers who that's been their path to power. They are in power to the extent that that can be said to be true of them at all, because they have made a habit of making tough re-elections for Republicans when they don't toe the Tea Party line.
Right. But, the point I'm trying to make here is that whether it's healthcare with McConnell and, many people say McConnell didn't really want to do healthcare first. He wanted to do infrastructure. He certainly wanted to do taxes. He didn't want to do this. But it was forced on him. And it was forced on him partially because Republicans committed themselves to it. So, he doesn't escape responsibility here. Yeah, point being that everybody, it was McConnell and Ryan who were trying to do this healthcare thing, not Trump. It's Mattis and Tillerson who are trying to do foreign policy, not Trump. Trump is being isolated and they're trying to keep him away from anything, especially his phone, so that he doesn't tweet because everything he touches is ruined.
Well, that's true. Meanwhile, he's wondering, is it golf day yet?
Right, exactly.
He's got
so, that's it. Hey, there's one other thing, you could do if you want to. Right. That's this pretty interesting David Brooks column that people are talking about.
Oh, really? Okay. What are they saying about it?
I'll find it for you here. I have it on my pundit roundup. There are too many things already in the list I sent you to go over. But let's see. Brooks, and where do we got here?
By the way, that whole excerpt about how mad Rex Tillerson is and how vacuous Jared Kushner is, once again, source for that is the American Conservative.
Right. I just thought that was funny.
Yes. I mean, we've known for a long time that there were, never Trumpers or whatever, but it's still pretty funny to see.
Right. Okay. The GOP rejects conservatism, interestingly enough, is the title of Brooks's column.
How interesting is that?
Yeah, there's a structural flaw in modern capitalism. Tremendous income gains are going to those in the top 20%, but prospects are diminishing for those in the middle and working class. This gigantic trend widens inequality, exacerbates social segmentation, fuels distrust, and led to Donald Trump.
Okay, leave now, David.
Okay, conservative intellectuals were slow at understanding this and how serious it was. Now, conservative income redistribution doesn't look like liberal redistribution and talks about some of those differences, but Republican politicians could have picked up any one of these plans when they set out to repeal Obamacare, but they didn't. Republican politicians believe government should tax people less. Because Republicans have no governing vision, they can't really replace the Obama vision with some alternative. They just accept the basic structure of Obamacare and cut it back some. Because Republicans have no governing vision, and we've talked about this, I've always said that about the House, no governance. They can't argue for their plans. Health and Human Services Secretary Tom Price came to Aspen Ideas Festival to make the case for GOP approach. It's not that he had bad arguments. He had no arguments. No vision for the sort of healthcare system that bills would usher in. He filled his time by rising to a level of vapid generality that was utterly detached from the choices in the actual legislation. Because Republicans have no national vision, they seem largely uninterested in the actual effects their legislation would have on the country. This Senate bill would be completely unworkable because anybody with half a brain, Morans, would get insurance only when they're sick. Worse, this bill takes all the devastating trends affecting the middle class and working class, all the instability, all the struggle, all the pain, and makes it worse. As the CBO indicated, the Senate plan would throw 22 million people off the insurance rolls, send them to privatized insurance plans that they couldn't afford to buy. Under the Senate bill, deductibles for poor families would be more than half their annual income. The plans are so incompetently and cruelly designed that, as the CBO put it, few low-income people would purchase any plan, and Paul Ryan said that's their problem. Less people will be insured because they're not going to buy it. But that's their choice, he said. Well, this isn't a conservative vision of American society, says Brooks. It's a vision rendered cruel by its obliviousness. I've been trying to think about the underlying mentality that now governs the Republican political class, and says Tocqueville long ago came up with it. They owe nothing to any man. They expect nothing from any man. They acquire the habit of always considering themselves as standing alone and apt to imagine their whole destinies in their own hands. Thus, not only does democracy make every man forget his ancestors, it hides his descendants and separates his contemporaries. It throws him back forever upon himself alone and threatens in the end to combine him entirely within the solitude of his own heart, the lone cowboy on the range in the West. Joan can speak to that myth as if, people aren't going to buy the cattle and somebody else owns the cattle, and how does it all work? It's not just you, but that's another story altogether. Interesting. And that, that's the column. And basically he says this GOP party has completely lost its way. And by the way, if you read not so between the lines, the health care bill they came up with is a piece of crap.
Oh. Well, that's not in there. Doesn't say that, but...
No. Well, it sort of does.
Okay. He can't bring himself to just come out and say it.
Again, I go back to why are Republican senators going to go back and suddenly find that they can vote for this bill?
Yeah.
I just don't think it's going to happen.
Well, I hope not. And I hope that they're not fooled into doing the same thing under a different name later on.
Well, our job to make sure that they don't. Our job to remind them when they're home that the home folks are really unhappy with this. And with that, I'll leave you. This is Greg Dworkin interrupting my friend David Waldman as I do every morning when I'm on the show. Take care, and I'll be back tomorrow. No Pund Roundup tomorrow, but I'll be back on the show, and we'll talk a little bit about some more of the fallout. And we'll see you then.
All right. Very good. Thanks very much, Greg.
Say hi to Joan.
I will. You mean right now? Hi to Joan? Like that? No, probably not. It's the old hello, Gracie story. Okay. Oh, I'm being asked to rate the call. Today's call, it was excellent. Were there minor problems? I did notice them. There was the Morse code. I don't think it was their fault. How do I know what to say? I'll say I had some problems that affected the call. Now I forgot that if I don't just say it's excellent, it becomes, this is intentional, of course. If I don't just say the call was excellent, then it becomes such a pain in the butt to describe, while you're trying to do a show anyway, why the call wasn't excellent, that you'll just end up quitting and not giving them the feedback. So, okay, we'll do that. I'll go in for the trick and cancel out sending the feedback. Sorry, I have not contributed to the continuing improvement of Skype. But I have a radio show to take care of, believe it or not. Okay, so let's see. Some of the things that we touched on and were mentioned as we were discussing things with Greg, but that we didn't dive all the way into. Let's see. Yesterday there was, and I think it's here from the New York Times. This is what Trump was tweet grousing about this morning. He was disputing the reports of what he loves to call the failing New York Times, which, for whatever reason, continues to publish, just as he continues to be president. The failing New York Times was reporting that he was, as he says, disengaged somehow from the healthcare legislative process. Of course, healthcare was disengaged from the healthcare legislative process as well, and it ended up not being anything like the legislation it was supposed to be. Now, Pocket is not opening this thing up correctly. We'll see if we can give it another shot. But it seems to be not finding the original New York Times piece correctly. So let's see if we can. Wonder if we can just sort of go fishing for it elsewhere. But being circulated widely yesterday was the excerpt from the New York Times piece. Maybe I can just grab that. I know that was circulating on Twitter yesterday. Oh, there's Joan tweeting hi, too. So she heard you say hi and heard me say hi when you told me to say hi. So at least we got that going for us. And we'll be visiting with Joan in a few minutes, no doubt. Let me see. Where can I find the excerpt from the New York Times piece that was being so widely circulated, and then I can open it up again from there. Let's see. I'll have to scroll back a little bit, but the excerpt, the idea of it, here we are. Brad Jeffy was circulating this piece, and I can open the New York Times piece from that tweet, hopefully, unless there's something wrong with that. Maybe the Russian hackers are preventing everybody from reading this story, but the important excerpt, I thought, or the illustrative excerpt, was this one here, and we'll pop it open here so we can read it in bigger type because I'm ancient. A senator who supports the bill left the meeting, and we're talking here about the meeting in which, again, Trump summoned the entire Republican Senate conference to the White House to kind of, I don't know what he thought. I guess he figured he was going to maybe talk them into going back to the Senate and just voting for this thing and getting it over with. I don't know whether he was just trying to take stock of what was going on. It's hard to know. It's hard to come away with a conclusion other than that he was not particularly engaged because it wasn't clear what he wanted the meeting to do, and they didn't announce any particular strategy goal for the meeting. It was just sort of come to the White House and talk about what's going on in some fashion, and maybe when you leave, something will happen. So, I mean, it's hard to look at that and say, yeah, he's totally engaged in the substance or the strategy. But also, by the way, worth pointing out, when you have those sorts of meetings, those meetings are kind of suspect to begin with. I mean, the idea of inviting just Republicans, sometimes it makes sense, when it's become obvious that you're not going to get any cooperation from Democrats. And truth be told, that is the case. You aren't going to get any cooperation with this bill from Democrats. But it's ordinarily viewed as highly suspect for the president to summon one party to the White House for the purposes of this kind of strategic planning. Now, as it happens, if it's like for a bill signing and it just happened to have been the case that no Democrats voted for the bill and only Republicans voted for the bill, and so fans of the bill are being invited to the White House for the White House bill signing, that's sort of excusable. But the idea of using the White House to have partisan political strategy sessions, it's ordinarily is frowned upon. It's very difficult, of course, to separate politics out from anything that goes on in the White House. But you're supposed to make an effort not to use it as a political clubhouse, essentially. But he's been ignoring that, and of course, it's small potatoes compared to the many, many ways in which he's working in corrupt fashion. So I'm sure nobody will take any particular notice, but we might as well note it for the record. Anyway, so he invited all the Republican senators to come to the White House, and they set up a nice big square-ish meeting space for them with gold curtains hanging behind the president and did nothing in particular. And here, the New York Times reports, a senator who supports the bill left the meeting at the White House with a sense that the president did not have a grasp of some of the basic elements of the Senate plan and seemed especially confused when a moderate Republican complained that opponents of the bill would cast it as a massive tax break for the wealthy, according to an aide who received a detailed readout of the exchange. You see what's happening here is, if the president weren't the president, if he were an average, ordinary, everyday American, which last year, for the bulk of it, aside from the fact that he was flying around the country claiming that he should be made president, that's what he was. He's sort of like, the talk radio call-in listener who just, calls in and declares himself an important political commentator, which is, it's the basis of our tradition in radio, period, American talk radio, and that goes for hosts as well. I mean, why am I such an expert in anything? It's because I bought a microphone and some computer equipment and convinced the Netroots radio guys to make me sound like I have a radio show. So in that sense, I'm no different. But essentially, he was just a interested, if not particularly educated or engaged observer of the politics around him, and that's what we allow for that. We encourage that. We try to educate people along the way and hope that they become experts in time in what they're talking about. But anyway, most people probably who were only, sort of half engaged in the process would have come away with the impression that the thing that we kept referring to in the news media as the health care bill had a lot to do with health care. Of course, we found out through our own reading and our own critical thinking that it really didn't have very much to do with health care and was really much more of a tax cut bill, or even more pointedly, a Medicaid repeal bill. But he has likely not done that kind of reading, and certainly wasn't reading the same sources we were reading. And if he was reading it with the idea in mind that they were fake news anyway, and it was all part of a vast plot against him because he's so successful and wealthy, and people hate that. So he never really, I don't think, got the fact that this bill was not really much about healthcare at all. Certainly didn't extend healthcare benefits or the ability to buy them to anyone in any way. And in fact, contracted it enormously, and did it by, through the mechanism of giving away gigantic tax breaks. I'm sure he really was caught by surprise by that. So anyway, one Senate aide says that one of the senators came away with the sense that the president really didn't know what was going on in this bill. Mr. Trump said, he became confused. I'll have to reiterate this point because I've strayed away. He seemed especially confused when a moderate Republican complained that, quite honestly, most people will see this as a massive tax break for the wealthy and not as a health care bill. So he's confused by that because that's not what the name of the bill is. So what do you mean? And Mr. Trump said, well, he planned to tackle tax reform later, ignoring the repeal's tax implications, the staff member added. In other words, he said, no, you're confused, Mr. Senator or Mrs. Senator, Madam Senator, whoever it was he was speaking to. It's not the case that this health care bill is a massive tax break for the wealthy. My tax reform bill is going to be a massive tax break for the wealthy. You're confused. You're thinking about something different. And that's when I guess everybody realized, oh, he really doesn't know what's in the bill. After the meeting, Mr. Trump played the role of cheerleader on Twitter, encouraging his weary Republican allies to keep working. I just finished a great meeting with the Republican senators concerning health care. Of course, that's what he still thinks it's about. He wrote, they really want to get it right, unlike O-Care. So, your general surface treatment of what's in there. It's a tweet about healthcare because that's what we're calling the bill. And really he has got no idea whatsoever what's actually in it. And we can open up were we able to get the New York Times piece open here? I don't know. You know what? It really didn't. I think there must be some kind of connectivity issue with respect to the New York Times piece, and that's okay. I think we got that was, I think, the important part of it, and we certainly could spend some time reading through the entirety of it, and we would learn something else along the way. But the key takeaway there is he doesn't have any idea what's actually in this thing, and you could hardly blame him for it ordinarily, except for the fact that he's president of the United States. The ordinary American does not have much idea what's in there, and was unable to formulate any idea for a long time because the contents of the bill were hidden, and you would have had to have been engaged from the beginning and stayed engaged and done almost nothing but remain engaged for the past couple of days in order to stay up to speed, because the details weren't really available until late in the week, and then you had to be watching, you had to be spending your weekend, and he's not going to spend his weekend doing this. You had to be spending your weekend watching the pundits parse the language of the bill. And that's just not what most people were going to do. Luckily, we do have a news media that was willing to do it. And for all of its problems and for all the criticisms we have of it, we owe them a great debt, along with other mostly uncompensated pundits who aren't counted among our pundit class, but who are, in fact, more pundit-like than the ones we pay to do the job, who parsed this thing and did it for free simply because they thought it was important and or were outraged about the contents and gave us their time that way. So thank you to everybody who knew what they were talking about and decided to spend their weekends talking about it so that we could pick it up on Monday. All right. So let's see. What else can we deal with here before we speak with Joan. There's a couple of items that we could turn our attention to. Let's see. Did I? No, I think I squeezed that one in at the end of the show. I'm not certain I did. You know what? Let's bring this one up just in case. I tried to, I think about shoehorning this in at the end of yesterday's show, and I just didn't get to it. The story is, since we had Farenthold back in the news, we'll say this makes for a decent segue. Oh, it looks like all of my pocket connectivity is slowing down today. The story is Trump's latest hire among his battery of attorneys, Jay Sekulow. We've seen him on the air a couple of times of late. I think he made a big splash, taking on a role as Trump's lawyer, but getting on. He was on TV with Fox and had a battle with Chris Wallace over whether or not he said, what was the subject of the battle back and forth? They hung up on whether or not Sekulow had used certain words, and of course he had used them right there on that program, and then he was backing away from them, but Wallace was trying to hold his feet to the fire and saying, "You just said," and they have the typical exchange that they have between members of the media and Trumpists when they are having a confrontation over whether or not you just used this word. Anyway, he's back in the news this time because it turns out he is the perfect Trumpista. He even more perfected than most in that he has put much of the Trump MO to work in his own life. He's written up here in The Guardian just a couple of days ago. Who's our author here? It's for some reason not easily apparent. There we are, John Swain. You have to look at where The Guardian lays their things out. Trump's lawyer's firm steered millions in donations to family members, files show. It doesn't necessarily reflect directly on Trump. It's just sort of interesting in terms of, or as background, and how many people on the right in particular seem to be engaged in this practice. Documents obtained by The Guardian reveal Jay Sekulow approved plans to push people to give to his Christian nonprofit, which then paid big sums to his family. Sound familiar? Essentially a self-dealing fake charity. More than 1,500 Americans were losing their jobs each day in June of 2009 as the U.S. struggled to climb out of a painful recession following its worst financial crisis in decades. But Jay Sekulow, who is now an attorney to Donald Trump, had a private jet to finance. His law firm was expecting a $3 million payday, and six-figure contracts for members of his family needed to be taken care of. Documents obtained by The Guardian show Sekulow that month approved plans to push poor and jobless people to donate money to his Christian nonprofit, which since 2000 has steered more than $60 million to Sekulow, his family, and their businesses. Wow. That's an awful big grift. Telemarketers for their nonprofit. Christian Advocates Serving Evangelism, or CASE, were instructed in contracts signed by Sekulow to urge people who pleaded poverty or said they were out of work to dig deep for a, quote, sacrificial gift. That is, they have reprinted here as part of, I guess was part of the contract, the scripts that were being approved for their telemarketing personnel that have, as you might imagine, in case you don't know exactly how telemarketing works, you might imagine that they do have scripts and that they have things to do. If you tell them as the victim of their telemarketing, and really, once you answer the phone, you are a victim. Really, once the phone rings, you're a victim. If you tell them, yeah, I just don't have any money to donate at this time, they have an answer written for that. Or what if you say, I'm out of work? Well, they have an answer written for that too. And no surprise, the answer that's written is designed to guilt you into giving anyway. For instance, I can certainly understand how that would make it difficult for you to share a gift like that right now. They told retirees who said that they were on a fixed income. That's their favorite answer. And had no extra money, before asking if they could spare even $20 within the next 3 weeks. And if you ask enough people, I guess it adds up. In addition to using tens of millions of dollars in donations to pay Sekulow, his wife, his sons, his brother, his sister-in-law, his niece and nephew, and their firms, Case has also been used to provide a series of unusual loans and property deals to the Sekulow family. It's not enough that they simply pay themselves the cash. They also lend themselves the rest of the money and make property deals with them. Attorneys and other experts specializing in nonprofit law said the Sekulows risked violating a federal law against nonprofits paying excessive benefits to the people responsible for running them. Sekulow declined to detail how he ensured the payments were reasonable. This is all highly unusual and gives the appearance of conflicts of interest that any nonprofit really should want to avoid, said Daniel Borachov, president of Charity Watch, a Chicago-based group that monitors nonprofits. Sekulow, 61, by the way, is the president of CASE and the chief counsel of its sister organization, the American Center for Legal Justice. I mean, okay, that's a little bit redundant, but all right. The American Center for Legal Justice. He has become one of Trump's most vocal defenders since joining the team of attorneys representing the president amid investigations into possible ties between his campaign and Russia. But it should also be noted that his possible investigations into ties between his campaign and his businesses and money laundering and self-dealing. So who better to represent the president on charges of self-dealing than an attorney who is a self-dealer? Sekulow did not respond to a series of detailed questions from The Guardian. His spokesman, Gene Kapp, said in an emailed statement, the financial arrangements between the ACLJ, CASE, and all related entities are regularly reviewed by outside independent compensation experts and have been determined to be reasonable. Now, what happens if you own the outside independent compensation expert? Then it's not independent, but you can just say it is anyway. But I'm not certain that's exactly what happened here. But at any rate, in addition, each entity has annual independent outside audits performed by certified public accounting firms, may or may not be owned by his in-laws or nieces or nephews. Further, the IRS has previously conducted audits of the ACLJ and CASE and found them to be in full compliance of all applicable laws. And if they're not, then you just have Tea Party people screaming that you're doing this for political reasons and we should impeach the commissioner of the IRS. Sekulow is an ally of the conservative televangelist Pat Robertson and made his name in Washington by fighting against abortion rights and efforts to legalize same-sex marriage. He founded CASE in 1988 to build on a successful appearance at the U.S. Supreme Court on behalf of the group Jews for Jesus, after an earlier career as a real estate attorney ended in bankruptcy and legal disputes. Sekulow has gone on to use CASE as a platform for legal action to defend Christians against perceived encroachments on their rights and creeping Sharia, I'm sure. CASE raises tens of millions of dollars each year, much of it in small amounts from Christians who receive direct appeals for money over the telephone or in the mail. The telemarketing contracts obtained by The Guardian show how fundraisers were instructed by Sekulow to deliver bleak warnings about topics including abortion, Sharia law, ding ding, and Barack Obama. It's time to let the president know that his vision of America is obscured and represents a dangerous threat to the that's what they said, Judeo-Christian, not Judeo, Judeo-Christian values that have been the cornerstone of our republic, one script from 2015 said. The 2013 script warned listeners that Obama's signature health care law, the Affordable Care Act, promised to give Planned Parenthood federal funding to open abortion referral clinics in your child's or your grandchild's middle school or high school. Dun, dun, dun. Sekulow has assured supporters that his organization does not charge for its services. We are dependent on God and the resources He provides through the gifts of people who share our vision. That is to say, we depend on God who guilts you into giving. That's the letter he wrote to his contributors. Anyway, as it happens, the long story short there is, he would cajole all these people into giving money to the organization, and then the organization would pay its board members and the people who ran it exorbitant management fees. And, of course, all the people who ran it were his family members. And in addition to all of that, when they contracted for outside services, he made sure they contracted with businesses owned by his family members. And what eventually happens here is Case is just raising money for the purposes of paying the bills to himself and to his family members, and they all end up walking away with and pocketing the money to the tune of $60 million over several years. That is it. That is a huge, huge grift. Again, it doesn't have anything directly to do with Donald Trump, but it explains a lot. If you have a Jay Sekulow character coming on television and saying, or testing out the trial balloon, as others later did, that even if the president did do some of these things, can we really say they were wrong? Well, it explains a lot. If you're ever wondering, well, how can a person like that sleep at night when they're lying like that? There's still a good question about how can they sleep at night, but the answer to the question of how can they lie like that is they are engaged in the same scam. And so it makes sense on a personal level for them to insist that there's nothing wrong with the president operating these scams, because if there is something wrong with the president operating those scams, then there's something wrong with them operating those scams, and that they can't have. So it's a sort of a convoluted way to getting around to understanding why it is that they say such things. And the bottom line is it comes down to they also are corrupt and are thieves. So I guess if you were only imagining that that was probably the case, the big news here is now you have proof that it's true. All right. Let's shift gears then again back to, we'll say probably the legislative arena and bring Joan McCarter in. I'm instructed to say hi, Joan, at this point in the show. Hi, Joan.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm fine.
Okay. You tired? It's been an exhausting couple of days.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we caught up on the basics with Greg. There was no way around it this morning. It was, of course, all the biggest news was the at least temporary stall in the Republican Medicaid repeal legislation that they're bringing forward, disguised as healthcare legislation.
Medicaid repeal.
Yeah. I mean, that's essentially what it is. There's tax cuts that come as a result.
Are paid for by Medicaid repeal.
Basically, if we don't pay for Medicaid anymore, we can give you this money in tax cuts. Although it's funny, I've been every time I bring that up, I start thinking maybe this is in a weird way a bit of progress in that Republicans are paying for their tax cuts these days. I mean, that's new. They could just simply say, P.S., you guys don't have to pay any more taxes. But
P.S.
All right. So there's something to it. And I guess that was what was supposed to give them a good CBO score. And I guess that's it. Maybe if it wasn't being done under reconciliation, they simply would have just made them unpaid for. Ordinarily,
possibly.
I hadn't really. So thank you, reconciliation. Although,
repealing the Obamacare taxes.
Yeah, sure.
Was the main part of Obamacare repeal all along, right, for Republicans, if you want to know the truth. Well,
that is true.
That and it was about Obama.
Right. Grr, we hate that guy.
Yeah.
Anyway. So as it happens,
the other part of it that doesn't just. Something at the top of my brain for some reason this morning. Those additional Medicare taxes that people over $250,000 per couple per year were making, where you were dinged for the Medicare payroll tax, that extended the life of the Medicare trust fund, extended its solvency by 12 years.
Yes.
Which is kind of important in this whole discussion of Obamacare and what it's done for the healthcare system. We're getting more Medicare out of it too. And that goes away along with Obamacare going away. So.
Right. So that's a good answer for all the people who, used to show up
who
to the Tea Party
this
rallies.
Doesn't have anything to do with me because I have Medicare.
Right. Either that or they were, also, showing up at Tea Party rallies with the, get your government hands off my Medicare signs.
Yes.
So, I'm paging you, Morans. This is what's happening with that used to be the big complaint among Republicans when they thought that mattered. They used to say the problem with Democrats, they're running the Medicare trust fund into the ground. It's going to be insolvent in X number of years. And at first they thought that might be a good launching pad for, well, let's get rid of it. It doesn't work. Or let's cut the benefits, or raise the eligibility age or something like that. And then every time you bail it out, and it's been saved a number of times, because it's not a difficult thing to do. Usually you make a choice like, well, if you're extraordinarily wealthy and really won't be dependent on it, though you will have it available anyway. It's not something that you don't get because you're wealthy, although you same guys keep saying we should means test it. We will just simply say, if you can afford to kick in a little extra because you're one of the top earners in the country, then we'll do that. And then we'll buy an extra couple of years for the trust fund, and, we'll keep an eye on it, and we'll do it again later. And hopefully we won't have to hit you the same way necessarily later. Not that I'm opposed to it, but this was a big concern when they needed to come up with a faux concern, and now they no longer do, and they're going to wreck all the work that was done addressing their last complaint.
Well, and by the way, undermining Medicare, destroying Medicaid, undermining Medicare, Social Security's next on the chopping block.
Yeah, I would guess so.
I mean, this is all of a piece of their long-term goal to get rid of pretty much every social insurance program. Just pick.
Yeah.
Wear them down, make them inefficient, make them unpopular, and do away with them.
I guess.
And this is a big first step with Medicaid.
Well, and it's so far at least. It's briefly stalled anyway, and I guess
briefly stalled.
Whether they'll come
it's
back.
Briefly stalled, and the Medicaid part of it is huge, as Greg was saying earlier, because of governors.
Yeah.
Because governors are hearing from their hospitals, particularly rural governors, saying we can't survive without Medicaid dollars. We're going to close up shop. Your people are going to lose health care, and it's going to be on you because you're going to have to be making the decisions about how the smaller amount of funding you are getting is going to be doled out.
Well, that brings up a good point that Greg was harping on earlier, and I guess we really I don't know how much we've done on it in our own strategizing at Daily Kos, but it would be well worth reminding people that governors are good targets for their lobbying. If their senators are ducking them, there are certainly things that can be done about that to make it obvious to the media that their senators are ducking them. But it's a lot harder for your governor to duck away. I mean, they can't leave the state, and there's certainly security they can hide behind. But if you demonstrate at the State House or the Capitol or the governor's mansion, it's hard not to notice.
It's hard not to notice, and you're going to get good press for it.
And you might even find an ally inside the mansion.
And you might. And, you possibly won't. The first thing that comes to mind is Kentucky, where folks have very good reason to be raising hell with their governor.
Yes.
Who has decided to try to undermine the extremely successful Medicaid expansion.
Yes. They might as well.
And Obamacare program in Kentucky, Kynect.
Mm-hmm. Their governor's from hell, so it might be interesting to do.
Yeah. So just, if you're in Kentucky, Mitch McConnell certainly deserves to be given hell. He probably won't show his face. Go raise hell with Matt Bevin.
Yeah. But even where you don't find an ally, where you don't find an ally, they deserve it. And where you surprise yourself and find that you do have an ally, great. What could be better? And they're pretty well attuned at getting that.
Get on the front pages of from local newspapers.
They can help. If they happen to be allies inside the mansion, they'll be happy to help you get in a newspaper.
Yeah. And, maybe they'll ask some tough questions directly of the governor or the senators or at least their staffs. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. Show up at your capitals.
Absolutely. And also just another reminder again that this is not, that having them delay it, not only is that not the end of the story, but that was always the hope that we would be able to get them to delay the vote. That's
right.
been the hope of this strategy of the past couple of weeks. But that was always coupled with the reason we were hoping for even a temporary delay was so that you could lay it on twice as thick when they came home during the break. And so the biggest mistake would be to say, okay, we've won our reprieve and now we can take the July 4th week off from pressuring them. They have agreed to our first short-term goal. Now, the purpose of the first short-term goal was to get them to come back and hear about it twice as loud.
Yep.
So by no means should you lay off. Although, while it's true that this doesn't mean you need to give up your entire family life or all your plans for the entirety of the week, but be conscious that you're contributing to the noise level during the July 4th week, and when you go out to watch the fireworks, or especially if you go to your local parade and the politicians are there, and it really doesn't even necessarily have to be the senators. Basically, anybody who has ever dreamed of becoming a senator or who you suspect might one day want to become one can be pressured on this. If your local House member shows up and they're a Republican, they're not done with this either. And by the way, local state politicians, not only just governors, but everybody's dependent on consistent funding for Medicaid and or is probably operating with one eye on one day running for Congress. So someday this will be you under this pressure. And it's important that you know that even if this is a Republican area, we're going to give you hell when it comes to messing with Medicaid.
Right. And it is something that legislators have to be thinking about too, state legislators. Mm-hmm. I mean, they've got to write the budgets. They've got to find money. It's not just the governors that are doing this. Right. Of course, governors' offices administer Medicaid, but the money comes from the legislature. So.
Yeah. And one day.
At every level. Yes, absolutely. Raise hell.
Yeah. It doesn't matter if your senator is ducking you. There'll be a politician at your July 4th parade.
Yes.
So he's either an ally or
if
someone who's
your senator isn't showing, you could always get a cardboard blow up of your senator.
Too. Lots of good tactics for what to do if your senator is ducking you or hiding in a hotel or taking a trip overseas during July 4th, which I've always found kind of amazing. It's amazing that lots of people do it.
Leave the country.
Leave the country during July 4th. That's nuts. But okay.
One thing that could also happen is your Democratic senator could go next door to a red state and hold town meetings there on.
That's true. You could encourage him to do that.
For his or her colleagues' constituents.
Yeah. Some of those places it makes a lot of sense. There's lots of cross-border traffic anyway, and if it doesn't make any particular sense and it's a weird incursion, so much the better. It will get noticed.
Yeah. It will get noted, and it'll be slightly humiliating for the Republican who refuses to show up.
I'm for that. All right. Well, so that's obviously the biggest item on the legislative agenda. But and this is a good reminder once again not to let up. But let's see what other items on your agenda, either politically or personally.
Honestly, Trump care is the only thing on my own agenda.
I mean, that's really what everybody's focusing on. But
and me in particular, because I've been writing about this for how many years now?
Oh, I don't know. Don't count.
I know that we've got a very well-informed audience, but what's important is that our very well-informed audience informs everybody that they know how devastating this bill could be. And not just for the people on Medicaid, not just for the people who are getting Obamacare policies.
No, of course not.
It's everybody.
Well, that's one of the biggest hidden factors in all of this. I mean, certainly our audience does know this, or has, they probably were largely able to figure it out on their own before we ever said anything. But, the reforms, the changes and repeals that are being proposed here, I'll obviously they'll have a large impact on everybody's insurance. And by the way, that traces its origins back to the fact that Obamacare was about regulating the private insurance market. It isn't a giant government conspiracy of any kind, and there isn't government insurance that's been handed out to everybody. I mean, Medicaid certainly is about as close as it comes to that. But there's a huge part of the main part of Obamacare as it's regarded in public has to do with handling private insurance. And if you change the regulations that say, well, at bottom, that insurance companies have to deal with you fairly and sell their products honestly, if you repeal those requirements, it's not going to take long before we're worse off than we were when we were at square one with this issue. They'll be making up for lost time in ripping people off. The last couple of years where they've had more difficulty reaching a nationwide audience with the ability to sell them crap insurance for, lower prices, but for zero coverage. Those plans still exist. They didn't disappear. They weren't regulated out of existence or made illegal. They just couldn't be sold on exchanges. And if you can eliminate those exchanges
Well, that's not exactly true. I mean, some were grandfathered in after the whole you won't lose your insurance, but policies have to have certain essential health benefits, no matter what.
Well, largely, yes. That's true. I was thinking
you
of the
might have
grandfathering.
extremely high deductibles, but there are certain things that you're going to get regardless. You are going to get preventive care with no copay. You're going to get your annual physical, mammogram, pap smear, all of that stuff, all of the routine maintenance you're getting without copay, no matter what kind of policy you have.
Okay.
Now, it could be junky beyond that. You could have extremely high deductibles beyond that. But at the very basis, those things are covered.
They had to at least
and would be
health.
waivable under both the House and Senate versions.
And so
the Senate does it in a different way than the House, but states could waive that requirement that insurance companies provide that much in both bills.
Is that an important difference, the mechanisms by which they were waived between the two houses?
Not particularly.
Okay. Fine.
The main thing is going to be gone for everybody. That could affect, something like 14 million employer provided benefit recipients. I said that poorly.
Okay.
Lots of people
recipients
get
of employer
from their employers.
Right. Okay.
You get their insurance through their employers. Is going to get them too, probably. Particularly if they're in a state that decides to take the waiver.
Yes.
And insurance companies are going to be pushing states to take these waivers. Absolutely. Because it saves them money.
Yeah. And they can pretend to pass those savings on to you, I suppose. Not that they will.
No. Here's another important thing that it does. We're going to talk actuarial values, which is kind of not fun, but that's basically how much of your premium is going to pay for your care.
All right.
Under Obamacare, the minimum is 70% of what you pay into your insurance policy is coming back to you in care. Under Trump Care, the Senate version, it's reduced to just 58%.
Oh. What was the original number?
The minimum was 70. It was 70 up.
Okay. Yeah, I used to, because I thought I recall back in the, maybe in the negotiation days of the Affordable Care Act, they were talking about higher numbers, and as I recall, it was like they were talking at 85. Was that?
Well, that's medical loss ratio.
Oh, okay.
It's 80 and 85% for the medical loss ratio.
All righty.
Which is a different calculation. That's the amount of profit an insurance company can take.
Yes. All righty. Okay.
Out of selling their policies. But in individual policies, you're looking at the actuarial value of how much bang for your health insurance buck you're getting. Okay. And so under Trump Care,
down to
it would be 58%.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Well, between that and I guess are some of the other more egregious provisions.
Other egregious provisions that come with the waivers in the Senate version, the B crap, as we like to call it. Thank you, Charles Gaba.
I'm sorry, the what?
The B crap.
B crap. Okay.
Better Care Reconciliation Act proposal. If you just toss proposal plan at the end of it, you
Very
can get
clever. Okay.
Yeah. Is possible return of annual and lifetime caps for what insurance pays for catastrophic illnesses. Because that's tied into the essential health benefits that are waivable.
Okay.
So you're getting your insurance through your employer, your kid gets cancer, your child is born premature, you could be facing $1 million cap either annually or lifetime for what your insurance company has to pay. After that, you're on the hook for the total bill.
Okay.
That was one of the things that drove so many medical bankruptcies before this law went into effect, before Obamacare.
Right.
That could be back. That would probably be back.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, if you can
for everybody,
have it, you would add
not just Obamacare people, for everybody with a private health insurance plan.
It wouldn't be fair just to let some people charge you or make you liable for all of your bills past the first, whatever, 100,000 or whatever. They have to let every company do that. Hooray. And that would mean you, yeah. Even if you liked your doctor and kept it and got the whole deal.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is why everybody needs to be calling their senators, raising hell, calling their governors. There is nothing in this bill that isn't awful. Either the House or Senate version. Nothing.
Well, yeah. That's the bottom line of it. I was thinking also of some of the other more ridiculous things that don't even appear to have anything in particular with provision of care or decisions about how those or decisions about how to provide care or pay for care, like the removal of the cap on the deductibility for CEOs of insurance companies.
Yes, there's that one.
Brazen.
And there's also the retroactive capital gains tax cut.
Yes, right. That one reminded me a lot of the like the scene from Dave where they're doing the budget. And he says, we're spending $47 million to make people feel better about cars they already bought. A retroactive, I mean, the whole point of the capital gains tax reduction has always supposedly been, well, we want to incentivize investment. And here we'd be saying, well, people have already decided to make those investments based on the incentives that existed, but we'd like to add some more incentive after the fact so that you could make more money.
Here's your pat on the back. Congratulations, you, for deciding back in January.
Yeah. Despite having already made, a 35% return on your investment, it could have been 50%. So we're going to give you the 50%. Now, you made a profit. Congratulations, but it could have been bigger. So we're going to give you that profit. We'll just make it up for you.
And that's totally necessary.
Yeah. Well, it's not even necessary to do prospectively, much less retroactively.
Yeah.
But
which once again proves how little this is a bill about healthcare,
right?
And how much it's a bill about tax cuts.
And was I would guess at the heart of why Donald Trump was so confused about it at yesterday's meeting, allegedly. Well, he now asserts that he was not confused at all.
Oh no, he knows everything there is to know about healthcare, and he's been totally engaged in this process and fake news.
Yes. Right, obviously. Even though, I know you know everything there is to know about healthcare, but this was a tax provision, period.
Yeah, the fact that he didn't understand that there was tax stuff in it.
Yeah. Oh, no, you're thinking about my tax bill, which is also doing beautifully, by the way, and moving so quickly. Well,
fake news.
Yeah. The big battle yesterday at the White House between Sarah Huckabee and Sarah Huckabee Sanders. And
yes.
And interestingly, the Playboy magazine correspondent, it was left to have this battle.
Well, Playboy magazine, but also with Sentinel News, which I don't know how Playboy and Sentinel work together, but
do they?
Yes.
Oh, he's the
which,
correspondent for both? Is that the idea?
I saw some speculation that this was actually set up, not on his part, but that he played into something that they were going to try to make happen.
Ah, okay.
By sending out Sarah Huckabee Sanders, having her first call on Breitbart,
so,
having this total fake news press briefing, maybe hoping to goad somebody into having that confrontation. It's possible. You know, more the media hates it. It really feeds into their narrative to the Trumpistas.
Yes.
To have that kind of interaction with a traditional news reporter.
I wouldn't have, my mind wouldn't have immediately gone to, well, why don't we need a traditional news reporter? Let's have the Playboy guy, but that wasn't their call.
Could have been anybody.
Yes.
They were probably thinking it would be Jim Acosta.
They probably did think so. I did see speculation beforehand once they announced that they were going to have the cameras back on for the first time in a week or whatever. I did see people immediately predicting, that probably means they're going to try and stage a confrontation with somebody and they want video of it. Mm-hmm. And I guess they did. They just didn't think it was, I guess they didn't think that the guy would press so hard, and I don't know whether they consider themselves fortunate in having had this exchange with Playboy magazine reporter or not, versus CNN. I don't know whether that hasn't impacted stuff much. Mostly people are pretty over the fact that there's a Playboy correspondent.
Yeah.
But
because lots of people read it for the news.
Now you have to.
Yeah.
So there you go. It's not even, you're not just lying anymore. You have to read it for the articles. Otherwise it's just, you're just flipping through pages for no reason.
No reason.
I like words. I like pictures of words. That would be really funny if so what they should have done with their first issue is they should have printed some enormous word in a centerfold. You could pull it out and say, and it just says articles on it.
About the article.
Yeah, it's about, I read this for the articles. That's what it should have been, the first centerfold of the new Playboy. Oh well. Missed out on that one.
Darn it.
Missed my calling? No, probably not. Anyway, I thought that was an interesting confrontation. I don't know if it's going to change much, and I don't know if you know whether they're back to no cameras again today. But
I don't know. I haven't seen the report yet from them. Let me see if I've got it in my email, because frankly, I probably should pay more attention to the guidance and press schedules I get from the White House, but I kind of don't.
You can only put out so many fires. If Barb doesn't say you should, then you don't have to. It could be a choice you make.
Off camera today.
Ah, okay, so they're back.
It's going to be spicy.
Yeah, okay.
At 1:30.
Wondered why they continue to do that. I have no real understanding of what they think they're getting out of that.
It could be also punishing spicy.
Punishing spicy?
Letting Sarah go on TV, not letting him go on TV.
That would be interesting. I hadn't thought about that as a possibility.
Who knows? It could be anything.
I was hoping you might, but I certainly don't. I don't know how you'd find out.
Do you wish that I could get into Donald Trump's brain and understand? That's a horrible thing to wish upon.
I don't think I would do that to anybody. Just do your best for observing it from the outside, I think. All right, let's see. I'm going to sort of scan over and see whether there are other things we ought to hit on, or if you have other items to bring to the fore, even if whether you know about them or just find they're interesting or they're catching your eye now. Or you don't have to be the expert on anything.
Well, we're going to have Carrie writing about the end of the Supreme Court term and what it proved about Gorsuch. Essentially, that yeah, he really is the next Scalia. Yeah. And he's trying to be. He is trying very hard to position himself as the leader of the conservatives. Yeah, and maybe we'll breathe a huge sigh of relief that Anthony Kennedy has chosen his new clerks and is going to be back next term.
Yes, that's at least something.
It was a huge relief.
It will be a huge disaster, of course, to give him another opportunity to nominate another judge. Who knows where he's going to go on this one? It's hard to imagine that you could find somebody worse than Gorsuch, but it would be done pretty quickly, and they have names ready to go for people who are, from our perspective, worse than.
Yes.
All right. So that'll be coming up, later on today on the front page. We discussed it a little bit with Armando yesterday, but it'd be nice to have a new take on it.
Mostly about Gorsuch. Mostly about how bad, how extreme, and confrontational even, in a sort of passive-aggressive way that you have to be when you're on the Supreme Court. He has been.
Yeah.
So, there's that. Hunter will be Hunter.
Yes, well, that's good.
Which is all fun.
Always
Talking about Fox News.
Oh? In what respect? Or just generally? I'm going to bash them.
It's a Think Progress story. Fox News host argues stripping coverage for millions is no biggie since we're all going to die anyway.
Oh, well. All right.
Yeah.
That's like the...
Which is true.
True. The George W. Bush view of history.
Yes.
Don't study it, you'll be dead.
But some of us are going to die prematurely and by incurring huge costs to our families if this passes.
Yes. Dying in misery is dying is dying, as far as he's concerned, and he likely won't die in misery, although we might wish it. I don't know if you're that kind of person. But, okay. Well, we'll be examining that, and among other things. Oh, you know what? I wanted to bring up, I saw that, Devin Nunes, now, apparently becoming more explicit in his position that, one, he never really recused himself, and that, two, he can reassume leadership of the Russia probe at any time that he considers it appropriate. There's really nothing blocking him from doing it. And really, you might think about doing it right away. I don't know if that reached your desk.
But, did not reach my desk.
Yes. Apparently, they went back and checked the record, and he never did say, I'm recusing myself. He did say he was stepping aside, but not recusing himself, and that he now says he is still being fully read in on the House Russia investigation and can retake control of the probe at any time if he wants to. But for now, he'll be staying away.
Is he have any more running back and forth to the White House? Have we seen him in the Rose Garden?
I don't know. People probably
hiding in the bushes with Spicy?
I haven't, but maybe people stopped paying attention to where he was going once he said he was stepping aside and that our guard was down.
Somebody needs to start paying attention to Nunes again.
I guess so. And for that matter, I guess monitoring what it means for Jeff Sessions, who did say he was recusing himself, but I guess these guys have a different definition of what recusing yourself actually means. So I don't know. I found that kind of interesting and a red flag, and well worth keeping in mind. Let's see, other items up for discussion today, or I mean, it's really been all-consuming.
I'm seeing that Lindsey Graham is in front of the cameras again.
Well,
telling Casey Hunt that if GOP doesn't reach an agreement on healthcare by Friday, it will be the end of one-party healthcare talks. This was one other odd thing that came up yesterday. McConnell said he'd have the new bill ready by Friday to send to the CBO to score next week.
I see. This Friday.
This Friday.
Okay.
Which is really soon.
Yeah. I guess I'm not terribly surprised. It seemed, look, we got the hint earlier that they were sort of doing this as a modular thing, that they had like little bits and pieces of plug and play policy proposals that they could plug in here and there and remove here and there in order to help, in order to be able to tweak the CBO score, which was interesting for them to then, there was a good section, a significant portion of the conference that was busy simply dismissing the CBO as a legitimate entity altogether. So why you would go through the trouble of building your bill in this modular fashion so that CBO would give you the score you wanted, only if you're in the end going to say CBO sucks anyway. I
think, and you know, we always can overestimate Mitch McConnell's savvy, but I think that this bill was designed to have that larger cost savings than the House bill on purpose.
Yeah.
So this first version, he had all of that quote unquote surplus that he could then divvy up and try to get the Medicaid expansion folks on board by saying, okay, here's this much more in opioid money. Here's this much more in a stability fund. Here's this much more for a high risk pool. I think that was probably one of the things he had in mind, was having this chunk of money then that he could dole out and play with to get people on board.
Okay.
Of course, the problem with that is that the Ted Cruz's and Mike Lee's and Rand Paul's see this big chunk of money and say, great.
Right. That's why I'm for it.
Right. So that was always a tricky thing on McConnell's part, but I think that was probably what was behind this. And remember, it was being posed as a discussion draft, this discussion draft bill going to CBO. But the problem is the headline that comes out of it is not the cost savings. It's the 22 million people losing health care, 15 million of whom will lose it next year. That's the headline that comes out every time. And that's the headline that Republicans did not want to be responsible for.
Well, guess they're stuck with it now.
Yeah.
But that's a good, I mean, that's at least an attempt at being strategic about it, and I can understand that from McConnell. You just come out way ahead on the savings, not necessarily with the intention of actually netting those savings, but with the idea that you have some $200 billion to give back if necessary to try and buy back some wavering votes. Yeah, so the question is whether there are more of those that need to be bought or there are more that will begin to drift away the lower the number drifts. But
right. Well, and how he does the balancing act between the hard right and what we're calling moderates actually are.
That other group of right-wingers.
Or Ron Johnson, who the hell knows what he wants.
Yeah, he was a bit of a surprise in all this. But, yeah.
But there is one other thing to think about with this, is that Mitch McConnell, famed institutionalist, famed savvy politician, is maybe he's too smart for his own good. Adam Gentleson, who was Gentleson?
Is that right? Okay.
I'm not sure which, was Harry Reid's chief of staff. And he's been watching this very closely. And he made a really good point yesterday that I think has been overlooked by pretty much all of us. McConnell has never actually shepherded through a major piece of legislation.
Is that right?
Yeah. And thinking back on it, since he's been leader, there hasn't been any new big thing passed. It's been continuing resolutions. It's been nominations. It's been the stuff that has to get passed, but not any new initiative.
That's true. I mean, I guess I attribute it to the function of being Republican, but still, that's true. He's never really done anything like this.
Yeah. And, in the minority, he was able to keep an iron fist on his caucus and keep them lined up behind him. But now that they're actually governing and they've got a Republican president who's going to be signing off on stuff, that gets all of a sudden a little bit harder.
If only major news media had at some point insisted that Republicans show they knew how to govern.
Right.
Or remember that they had done it, because I recall.
And on McConnell, it's also worth remembering, we've talked about this before, his failure in 2015 to keep the NSA's surveillance powers. We've talked about it before, but when he tried this before in 2015, he failed.
Yeah. Well, that is a good point, and not much discussed. Well, so there's a lot at stake for him. I don't know whether he's the kind of guy who's thinking legacy or of any kind at this point, but he may be just as happy with people thinking that his legacy depends on retaining majorities and nothing else. But yeah, wow, how interesting is that to eventually have to walk away with your legacy being all I did was. It was always pure partisanship, just a question of can I keep a majority and do nothing with it. Wow. Mm-hmm. Well, that'd be depressing.
Well, and the other thing that Jenelson was talking about in this thread was how much this is undermining or has the potential to undermine his actual leadership in the conference. The position that he is putting his senators in for what?
Yeah. That's a good
and
point.
There's a back and forth, this failure. All of it is going to undermine their confidence in him. At least some of them.
I would think so. If any of them have any vision for the future, which that might not be the case, I guess, but surely it feels like there's somebody somewhere who came to Congress thinking something big was going to happen, or wishing something big was going to happen, or hoping that they were going to be the ones driving it, and who feels disappointed. But who might that be? Jeff Flake? Yeah. I don't know. I'm trying to imagine, but that's interesting. So, okay, I'll have to take a look around. Maybe you can send me that, a link to some point in that thread. I'll include that for people to read.
I will do so.
It's a great observation. Thanks, Joan. Thanks for bringing it over to us. Appreciate your visiting with us as always.
You are most welcome.
And we'll see you next Wednesday, barring, I don't know, end of the world, apocalypse, anything like that.
What day is the 4th?
That would be, I think that's Tuesday. So I don't know.
Okay. Yes.
You're not going to be all drunk or anything, are you? Come on.
No, I'm not going to be all drunk.
We'll give you leeway if that's the case. I mean, I don't want to judge. I'm just saying. Okay, well, we'll be done with the 4th of July holiday by that point. Not that our senators will be, but we'll visit with you again then. And if things change, we can let it slide a day or two if necessary. Just drink in moderation, Joan, please. Right. You're well known as a drunk. I don't know. I've never heard anything about her drinking in any setting. I'm sure it happens. I just don't know anything about it. Okay.
Not enough.
Okay, so why don't you bump it up and go for it this July 4th? And then I'll come over to your house. Awesome. Okay. We'll all drink at Joan's place. Thanks, Joan. We'll be there in a couple of days. Thanks for the invite.
You're always welcome, Ted.
We'll talk to you next week. Take care. Joan McCarter, our senior political writer, and I guess our most our drunk with the highest aspirations for the upcoming July 4th weekend. I don't know. Sounds like fun anyway. Probably not at all true, but it's fun to joke about because it's not true. It's not funny because it's not true, but it's fun to joke about anyway. What's coming up on the after show? Most of it is going to be true. I'll tell you what's coming up. A case of mistaken identity, a 35-year-old Honduran immigrant died while in ICE custody. Mistaken identity. Geez, dude. The Transportation Safety Administration set to require passengers to submit for inspection now books, magazines, and every scrap of paper in their bags. That's not at all intrusive. And the White House is now using James O'Keefe videos to attack the press as fake news, which proves all the possibilities exist on the principles of quantum mechanics.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show.
With David Waldman.
Hey man, anything can be true in the age of Trump, right? Quantum mechanics holds true in the age of Trump after all. For the last half, of course, a visit with Angela Marks, a.k.a. Angie in Washington State, for a political and world news roundup. What could be better or more appropriate? All of that on the after show with Wink and Justice next.